Hello and welcome to another tabletop talk and draw. My name is Storm Cook, and today I did a little something different. I'm working from an existing picture. The picture that you see is one that my player Jim picked out for an NPC named Carwin Badham, and I wanted to change up the picture, but also pay homage to the picture. And I'll give you some reasons why I did that. One of the things from a leading question that I asked Jim was, the warehouse is being watched. Who is this guy? What does he want? And Jim came up with Carwin Badham, a former drinking friend of his character. And Carwin always has these crazy schemes that don't work. I go more in depth into this whole thing in Can Players Draw on Your Map video, which also has a bit about leading questions. So if you want to hear about role playing game tips that I think are useful, you should check that video out. There'll be a link to it at the end of this one. So, anyways, back to Carwin. So Carwin's scheme actually worked out for once. He brokered a deal between the players who had amassed a considerable fortune of like maker artifacts, and the makers are sort of the precursor race on the planet, right? And between the players and the sorcerer guy. And so Carwin made a nice commission on this and had money. And now he's come up with another scheme where he's found a treasure map, and he wants to join in on the fun. He wants to go on the expedition. So I wanted to draw Carwin coming to the table with like everything he could possibly get, and Jim really appreciated it. Really ended up liking the drawing that I did, and so this is what I'm doing. So I'm sort of paying ode to the original drawing and then making it my own, because I'm not going to draw in the style of the person who did the original. I don't know who that artist was. I don't know where Jim found it. But I still want to honor it and not even try to pretend that I came up with this character completely on my own, which I didn't. I had two people, the original artist and Jim's input. So one of the things I'm doing is, since I know there's going to be a lot of detail going into this drawing, I am going to kind of leave a lot of the line behind, and it's going to be on its own layer and a multiply layer, and that will allow me to color beneath it. And often I usually will paint to the line, over the line, through the line, whatever you want to call it. And this time I'm doing more of a comic book coloring style where the line really stays there, because I know there's so much detail, and if I go full, like, paint everything, it will take me twice as long. And this is just for our own yucks. This is not for any kind of profit or anything like that. So I didn't want to spend all day on it, and I think I ended up doing this probably in about 3 hours. So he's going to have a backpack, he's going to have a crossbow, he's got a spear, he's got a hatchet, he's got a short sword, he's got a knife, he's got a bedroll, he's got his tricorner hat and stuff like that. So our game is kind of, speaking of the tricorner hat, our game is kind of set in a sword and sorcery world, but we are kind of leaning towards a more colonial aesthetic, I guess, colonial time aesthetic, or really late Renaissance aesthetic. And I think this is partly because we're doing there's Lagosa, the main city, is a very maritime oriented city. It was founded by sort of pirate families, and I've got this weird lock of hair that's doing something. I just took a shower, so excuse me. Oh, fuck it. It's there. It's there. Um, let's see if I can. I, I'm looking at myself in the camera. I don't care. Anyways, so don't ever look at yourself. That's the trick of doing these videos. Just don't pay attention to yourself. Pay your attention to the artwork. So I think because it was maritime, we're kind of leaning towards a lot of Age of Sail kind of stuff, and that's cool. We can do that. We did decide to keep gunpowder out of the game, and so he's not there with a musket, but I am kind of using sort of Revolutionary War uniforms and stuff. And one of the things that Jim liked was, he said, it looks like he got his equipment from like 4 different uniforms. And that was kind of intentional on my part. In fact, I come up with kind of a hideous color scheme um, and intentionally so, which is a really kind of tough balancing act for an artist because I want it to be hideous, but I also it's still got to sit and read as a picture, right? It can't be too ridiculous. So you'll notice that I wrote the guilty fish gold there on the tankard or the jug that he's holding. And the guilty fish is the inn that our players tend to use as their kind of home meeting space and stuff like that. And it's starting to get some character, and I wanted to pay homage to that in the drawing. So now I put the flat in, so that way I can just select that and paint in it, and it's not going to. I can lock the pixels. So what that means is I can only paint on the pixels that that are there, and that way I can be very loose. And if it goes into the white, it won't paint. And that's a really useful tool that both Photoshop and Clip Studio Paint have, and I think a lot of artists use it. So the purple and brown is actually based on some reference that I found on Pinterest of a leather jerkin that was sort of this really dark blue purple in patches, and then it's dark brown in patches, and it looks pretty good, but at the moment, as it's just flat color being put down, it looks horrible. And I will deepen up the shadows and punch up the highlights as we go along, but it'll take me a little while to get there because, like I said, this had a lot of detail into it, and that detail just takes time. You gotta make sure that your lines carry through correctly, and you know things sit behind each other right. And it's just I knew this was going to be this way because I knew he was going to have a lot of crap on him and a lot of straps and bandoliers and whatnot. So yeah, it was just you know a constant negotiation of what looks right where and how to work it. Um, and right now I'm just kind of putting down the flat color. I'm not really worried about the shadows and the highlights yet. I will come back and do another pass and really work that over. Um, One of the things that I was having a little bit of difficulty with, and it took me a little more time to deal with than I would have liked, is that I don't think I set the top line to multiply. And so what happened was, as I was filling in with the paint tool, because there's a layer underneath it with complete line, um, the paint tool would go up to the line if it was a thick line and stop. Now I have the paint tool set to a little bit of overlap, for a few pixels, but it's only a little bit. My nose is itchy. And so what would happen is I'd get this sort of light gray line that should have been darker. And so there was a very easy way of overcoming it, is you just paint over it, because the layer above it that had all the multiply line on it would sit there just fine and wouldn't be touched. But it did cause me to have to go back and kind of hit those lines again and make sure that they were reading as dark lines, deep lines, as opposed to sort of these kind of odd, opaque, light gray lines that were really messing things up. You know, getting the hair in here. Now I'm starting to work in some shadows, and I think that you can see it start to come together and start to have some life. When I come in with the highlights, I think that really makes that face come to life. I actually did the face super quick. Usually it takes me a lot longer to do faces, but I just blew through that for some reason. Sometimes you're on. Sometimes it's just the way it is, and sometimes you're not, and it's a struggle to get through everything. Um, I love those moments when you're just on, and it's so much fun. I did have a layer set above the multiply layer that was just for highlights, and if I wanted to remove a line, I could select the color next to that line and sort of paint over it, and either remove it in part or remove it in whole. But I did that very judiciously, again, kind of keeping that sort of comic book style line there, like almost a cell shaded kind of situation. But um, like I hated that gray green of the bandoliers going across the chest until I started putting the shadows and highlights in, and then it started to sit and read okay to me. Um, you know, I went with a very modern dagger, sheath. I don't think medieval times, had that kind of arrangement. That's sort of something that we started seeing probably in the 90s and on modern shoulders. And I'm talking, 1990, and now you see it quite often, in their web gear and whatnot. But like now you can see that purple is starting to sit okay against the brown because of those highlights kind of popped it up and gave it a little bit of texture, and I keep working in, it starts to read. Now I kept it a little lighter than the actual um, uh, sorry, the reference that I had. And the reason being was I knew that I wanted that green jacket, the coat there, to be darker than the brown. So I didn't want to have to fight the two things together, because the original reference was much more saturated and a much deeper brown, red brown. And if I put that red brown of the reference right next to the jacket, they would have scintillated. They would have been too close. And so, this is the artistic license that I get to play with, is like, hey, no one's going to know. No one's going to, unless I show you that reference and I don't even know where it is anymore. I didn't save it. I just had it up on my screen, on my second screen, which is what I look at when I'm looking off camera. I'm looking up at my second screen because I'm playing the video right now as I narrate it, right? So that way I can do a time lapse, do it very quickly, and you're not spending 4 hours watching me paint this thing and narrate this thing. I would rather keep it as brief as possible, but still have, you know, you can see the technique as that I'm using as I go along, and the choices that I make as I go along. I did want to. We blew past the spats there. Those are the things on the shoes. For some reason, I absolutely adore spats. I really really like them. They're fun. There's something, and that's sort of like a World War II, circa 1942 infantryman thing. You didn't even see those very late in the war. You saw those kind of in the beginning of the war. And I don't know which units had them, but there were some units that had them, and yeah. So there we have it. That's it, and it's completed. I hope you enjoyed this. Please remember to like and subscribe. And if you've got a comment, please leave me a comment. If you have any questions, please, if you didn't like something, please say something. If you loved something, please say something. It really helps me out, and I want to do this and educate and entertain at the same time. Anyways, until next time, keep on keeping on. Thank you.